Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how a campaigner trying to get to the bottom of why Boris Johnson was allowed to elevate two seemingly very unsuitable people to the House of Lords, Charlotte Owen and Ross Kempell, was permitted. A Freedom of Information request, which faced a lot of obstruction, was eventually granted, but for me just raises even more questions about Boris Johnson's judgment in this matter, as well as the strength of the House of Lords selection process. But for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, there was an article published last week. It was revealed that someone, a journalist, had been spending the last 18 months trying to find the official reasons why Charlotte Owen and Ross Kempell were considered suitable people to enter the House of Lords. Now, we often joke about the ancient and dusty members of the Lords, but that is a consequence of the fact that they are a revising chamber and the people appointed should have a lifetime's experience of scrutinising the legislation if they are to be competent for the role. So you're going to enter the House of Lords when you're already at least at the upper end of middle age. And of course, you're going to then become quite old. Basically, we work on the following principle here. If you're an idiot mucking about with our laws, you should at least be elected. Then it's the public's fault. If the public don't get to decide, you should at least know what you're doing. Ross Kempell was 31 years old when he was elevated to the House of Lords. Charlotte Owen was 30. Now, both of these people had only just turned those ages when they were appointed, which means that they were doing the stuff that earned them that elevation when they were even younger. Their appointments immediately stuck out like a sore thumb because they were young, largely unknown, didn't really have a track record to indicate being political prodigies, and certainly had no record of major public service. Members of the House of Lords are mostly former senior politicians, trade unionists, charity workers, lawyers, business leaders, people who understand the process and application of lawmaking because they have spent years, often decades, scrutinising it in their own non-political capacity, or political capacity if they're former MPs. It's not even very common to have former backbench MPs in the House of Lords. You get the odd one, but mostly it's expected that you've had frontbench experience, that you've actually presented legislation. But two people who were around 30 years old with no obvious experience at the sharp end of politics, that was strange. Frankly, Nadine Dorries had a stronger claim to be sent to the Lords. So Freedom of Information requests were made to find out on what basis these toddlers were being allowed to revise our laws without a mandate from the public. The request was apparently refused initially, hence why it has taken so long to get the information. But eventually they were made to comply. Now, in the citations, according to this report, it says that both Kempell and Owen were suitable based on their work with the government at the heart of the pandemic. Now, first of all, anyone strongly associated with the government's work on COVID during 2020 gets absolutely no credit at all. It was a politically motivated shambles which resulted in extra deaths on a literally biblical scale. But second, what exactly did these people do that was so impressive? Kempell was a journalist, if we're going to be charitable, for Guido Fawkes. So think of a sort of Darren Grimes type character with maybe a little bit more brain. Owen had no career at all. She spent years working as an intern for various Conservative politicians for not a great deal of time. Something that is only possible, of course, due to Bank of Mum and Dad being well stocked. And then as a parliamentary assistant to, again, various Tory MPs for literally just a few months at a time. She didn't stay in post long enough to get a 1-year anniversary of being in post card or anything. She didn't stay in any position long enough to deliver a project. Yet, according to this article, when the information was released by the obviously embarrassed House of Lords, it revealed she was supposedly advising Boris Johnson on ministerial appointments. Are you kidding me? It also said that she led on many sensitive and key projects. Doesn't bother to say which ones, of course, because, Only an idiot would let someone with her background of doing loads of jobs for like 6 months at a time before moving on to another one lead on any project. But she led on many projects, did she? Did she? It's not clear how she's even qualified to be involved in any major projects. She will definitely not have led any. So for me, this just raises more questions. Neither Kempell nor Owen will have actually led any major projects, much less many of them. Of that I'm certain. Not because Johnson wouldn't be stupid enough to do that. Remember, he put embarrassingly failed businesswoman Dido Harding in charge of a £37 billion project, which MPs later concluded had achieved absolutely zero. Like nothing. If you'd have spent £0 on it, it would have achieved the same thing, is what they're saying. Now, the reason I say these characters did not lead any major projects, much less many, is because it would have been impossible not to have known about it. Journalists are very nosy people, you may have noticed. They want to know exactly what the government are doing and exactly who is making the decisions. The idea that there could be any major projects, much less many of them, so secret that nobody knew about it, including nosy journalists, especially when Johnson's government leaked like a sieve, is ridiculous. Remember, Dominic Cummings was more than happy to spill the beans when he was losing his power struggle with Carrie at the time, Carrie Symonds, now Carrie Johnson. So if, as I strongly suspect, neither Kempell nor Owen did lead any major projects, and there is zero evidence that they did, it means the people nominating them for peerages lied in the applications, which means a couple of things. First, they may have been elevated to the House on false pretences. That is my speculation, of course, but there is no evidence offered to the contrary, so I think it's reasonable speculation. Besides, Johnson has been known to tell the odd fib from time to time, let's be honest. But second, it means that Boris Johnson knew he would not get them into the House of Lords without these claims. In other words, neither Kempell nor Owen, on the strong balance of probability, were at all suitable for entry to the House of Lords, and if Johnson hadn't made up some old bollocks, even the Appointments Committee would have had to knock them back. Which raises a huge question. Why did Boris Johnson want so desperately to get these two into the House of Lords? Sure, despite saying, when he became Prime Minister, he said he wanted to shrink the numbers in the House of Lords. Absolute rubbish. He always intended to pack it out with cronies. Governments do not want their legislation being held up in the House of Lords. When they've got legislation they want to get passed, they want to get it passed as quickly as possible. They don't want the House of Lords farting about with it. So they make sure the numbers are not against them. But there were plenty of stooges loyal to him that he could have sent instead. In fact, despite promising to put Nadine Dorries in the House of Lords, and despite her blaming Sunak for the fact it didn't go through, the reality is that Johnson could have sent her if he really wanted to. I mean, he put a Russian oligarch in the House of Lords, for goodness sake, against the strongest advice of our own security services. The idea he couldn't have rammed Dorries in there is something only Nads herself believes. So there must be some other reason why Johnson was so determined to get these two in. It's not because he was short of sycophantic candidates. It's not because Owen is his daughter and Kempell is not his son either. Must be something else. How did they manage to wrap him around their little fingers to get such high honour? Higher than he gave many of his closer and more experienced allies. Did they have something embarrassing on him? And was someone in their 20s really advising the Prime Minister on ministerial appointments? And if that part is actually true, why? Because Owen had only just turned 30 when she was sent to the Lords. So she was in her 20s when she was apparently deciding who should and should not be in our government. And why was the journalist chasing after this information blocked to begin with? Why did they have to force the Commission to release the information? Absolutely no reason for the public not to know in detail the reasons why every single member of the House of Lords is sitting there. They debate, revise and decide our laws. We don't elect them, so we have a right to know why they are appointed. And yet in the case of these two, we still don't know. The documentation is very poor. It's a hatchet job. Is this why the Commission refused to release the information? Because they knew that the appointments are not at all sound. It just raises so many more questions than I actually had about the appointments to begin with. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for listening, and until next time, I'll see you later.